was forced to marry the alien woman. But that night he wasn't ready for what she did there. Were no victory parades for the other side, no cities burning on live screens, no final speech declaring humanity's defeat. The war simply ended one morning when every satellite went dark for exactly 7 minutes. When they came back online, a single message repeated on every channel, in every human language. Cease all resistance. Terms will follow. The terms arrived 3 days later. Most people never read the full document. It was too long, too cold, written in the careful language of beings who did not rush and did not care about human emotions. Borders would change. Fleets would be restricted. Research would be monitored. Earth would remain technically free, but only because keeping it alive was more useful than destroying it. And then there was the final condition. A marriage. The Global Council debated for 40 hours straight. Some shouted. Some begged. Some threatened suicide rather than sign. But the fleets in orbit did not move, and the alien envoys did not blink. One human would marry one of theirs. Not for love, not for culture, for obedience. The council needed someone to offer. Someone with no political allies, no powerful family, no public support. Someone whose disappearance would not cause riots. That was how Elias Rowan's name appeared on the screen. Elias was not a soldier. He was not a hero. He worked deep beneath the surface of New Carthage City, maintaining power distribution systems that most people forgot even existed. He liked machines because machines followed rules. If something broke, there was always a reason. People were harder. When 2 council security officers arrived at his apartment, Elias thought there had been a mistake. He was still wearing his work jacket, oil on his hands, tools scattered on the table. "You need to come with us," one officer said. Elias frowned. "Is there a problem?" "Yes," the other replied. "A large one." They did not answer his questions during the drive. The city passed by outside the armored transport, clean and quiet, pretending nothing had changed. Elias watched people walking to work, laughing, arguing, living normal lives. None of them knew that someone had already been chosen to pay for that normal life. Inside the council chamber, Elias felt very small. Screens surrounded the circular room, each showing faces of leaders from different regions of Earth. Some looked ashamed, others looked relieved. None looked surprised to see him. The chairwoman spoke gently, which frightened him more than anger would have. "Elias Rowan," she said, "you have been selected to represent humanity in a diplomatic union." Elias swallowed. "I don't understand." She took a breath. "You will be married to a representative of the Alliance." The word married echoed in his head. "No," he said before he could stop himself. "You can't be serious. I'm not trained. I'm not important. I'm nobody." "That is exactly why you were chosen," another council member said quietly. Elias looked around the room. "So that's it? You just hand me over?" "We are preventing extinction," the chairwoman replied. "This is the cost." Elias laughed once, short and broken. "So I'm the cost?" No one argued. They gave him 1 hour to return home and prepare. 1 hour to pack his life into a single case. 1 hour to say goodbye to a world that had already decided it could live without him. Elias sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall. He did not cry. He did not scream. His mind felt empty, like a system that had lost power but had not yet shut down. He packed clothes first, simple things. Then tools, out of habit. He stopped when he realized they would not let him keep them. At the door, he hesitated. He looked back at the room. It was small, quiet, safe. He wondered if he would ever see a human sky again. The transport to orbit was silent. The officers avoided his eyes. When the hatch opened, Elias saw the alien vessel for the first time. It was enormous, shaped like a ring of dark metal and light. It did not look like something built. It looked like something grown. Inside, the air felt heavy but breathable. Gravity was slightly wrong, just enough to make his steps uncertain. Tall figures moved through wide halls, their bodies covered in smooth armor that reflected the light like water. No one spoke to him. He was taken to a waiting chamber with walls that slowly shifted color. After a long time, the doors opened. She entered. Ilias had expected something monstrous, something clearly not human. Instead, she was tall and slender, with skin the color of pale silver and eyes too bright to look at for long. Her face was calm, unreadable, but not cruel. This was the being he was meant to marry. She studied him the way a scientist studies a fragile object, not with hate, with interest. "So," she said, her voice smooth and perfectly translated, "you are the one they sent." Elias straightened, forcing himself to meet her gaze. "I didn't volunteer." Her lips curved slightly. "Neither did I." That was the first moment Elias realized something was wrong. Not with her, with everything he had been told. She turned and walked away, expecting him to follow. He did. As they moved through the citadel, Elias felt the weight of invisible eyes watching. This place was not a home. It was a test chamber. "You are afraid," she said without looking back. "Yes," Elias answered honestly. "Good," she replied. "Fear makes humans honest." He frowned. "You know a lot about humans." "I know what we allowed ourselves to learn," she said. "And what we were forbidden to learn?" They stopped before a massive doorway sealed with glowing symbols. She placed her hand against it, and it opened with a low hum. "This union," she continued, "is not about peace. It is about control." Elias's chest tightened. "Then why say that out loud?" She finally turned to face him, her eyes locked onto his with sudden intensity. "Because tonight," she said, "you will learn why they are afraid of your kind." Before he could ask what she meant, the doors closed behind them, and somewhere deep within the alien citadel, systems older than human history began to awaken. Elias walked through the alien citadel in a state of quiet disbelief. The halls were vast, more like tunnels grown from living metal than buildings humans had ever constructed. The light shifted in ways that made it hard to focus, and every corner seemed to hold an observer, though he could not see anyone. His steps echoed in a rhythm that sounded like his own heartbeat. She walked ahead of him, graceful and deliberate. Her presence commanded the space, but she did not speak for long stretches. Elias noticed the silence was not empty. It was loaded with meaning. It pressed on him, making him more aware of every sound, every breath, every small movement. He wanted to ask questions, but each time he opened his mouth, the words seemed weak. Her name was Lyra. That much he had learned from the council's briefing, but little else. She did not smile, did not offer handshakes or greetings. Her silver-toned skin reflected the pale light, making her seem even taller than she already was. Her eyes held a depth he could not measure, bright and unblinking. There was no warmth in her gaze, but it did not feel cruel either. It was as though she could see straight through him. They reached a chamber that resembled a human lounge in shape, but was alien in texture. Smooth walls curved into soft ceilings, and strange lights floated in the air without any visible source. She gestured to a seating area. "Sit," she said. Elias did, unsure of what he should be doing. Every instinct screamed that he was being tested, that a wrong move could have consequences far worse than embarrassment. She sat opposite him, folding her long limbs with careful precision. Elias felt the space between them shrink, though they had not moved. The weight of her presence was overwhelming. "You are the first human I have met," she said finally. Her voice was soft but firm, precise. Like every word had been chosen for effect. Elias shifted. "I don't know why I'm here. I was told it was for peace, but this feels like a trap." Her eyes studied him for a long time. "It is both. It is never just one thing with humans. That is why your species is dangerous." "Dangerous?" Elias repeated. "We lost the war. We were weak." "What makes us dangerous?" She leaned back slightly, her gaze never leaving him. "Your kind does not stay weak for long. You adapt. You survive. You learn. And sometimes, when we think we have control, you do something we did not anticipate." Elias felt a chill. He had spent his life around machines, systems, predictable outcomes. He was not used to thinking of humans as unpredictable. And yet she spoke with conviction that left no room for doubt. "I don't understand," he admitted. "Why me? I am not special. I am not a leader or a soldier." "Exactly," she replied. "You are expendable. That is why this is the perfect test. We need to know how far your species will go when pushed." "And you are not expecting anything." Elias tried to process her words. He had expected intimidation, maybe even threats, but this calm, measured observation unsettled him more. It felt like she knew things about him he could not see, like she could predict what he would do before he did it. A soft hum began to fill the room, almost imperceptible at first, but gradually louder. The lights flickered in a pattern, and Elias realized that the entire chamber was changing. The walls shifted, revealing panels of light that looked like maps or schematics. "Those are the Citadel's systems," she explained. "You will not understand all of them, but you will learn to notice patterns." Elias studied the panels, his mind racing. It was overwhelming. Each display was alive with data, constantly moving and changing. He could see the flow of energy through the Citadel, the movement of internal security units, and even readings of air composition in other sections. His training as a systems engineer helped him recognize certain structures, though not enough to grasp the full scale. "Why show me this?" he asked. "Because," she said simply, "you will need it." Elias's heart beat faster. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. He had been chosen to represent humanity, but he felt unprepared for even a simple interaction, let alone this strange, advanced environment. They sat in silence for a long time. Elias tried to speak, but no words came. Lyra, meanwhile, observed him with an intensity that made him fidget. The air between them was charged with unspoken questions, tests, and possibilities. Finally, she broke the silence. Humans are noisy. You speak too much and too little at the same time. You are complicated, but you learn quickly. Elias swallowed. I'm not sure that is a compliment. Perhaps not, she replied. But it is the truth. He realized the truth from her did not carry malice. It was not designed to comfort him. It was simply fact, as cold and clear as the metal of the citadel. That clarity was terrifying. Hours passed. Elias tried to observe, to make sense of the data flowing before him. Lyra remained beside him, a calm presence, occasionally pointing out patterns he might notice, sometimes asking questions he could not answer. Each interaction felt like a test of his thought process, his perception, his very nature. You fear tonight, she said at one point. Yes, Elias admitted. He did not try to hide it. He did not understand how she knew. Good, she said again. Fear is useful. It keeps you aware. You will need it. Fear teaches you more than comfort ever will. He nodded, though he did not fully understand. He wondered what was waiting for him tonight. What trials had been designed to test him in ways he could not imagine. Every instinct told him to resist, to flee, but he was surrounded by technology, by beings far beyond his understanding. There was no escape. The chamber shifted again, revealing a doorway he had not seen before. Lyra stood and gestured for him to follow. Elias hesitated but obeyed. The hall beyond was narrower, darker, and colder. Lights above flickered intermittently, creating a staccato effect that made shadows move like living things. Where are we going? He asked. To a place where you will see more than systems, she said. A place where you will understand why the Alliance fears humans. Elias followed, every step heavy with anticipation. He had no idea what lay ahead. The citadel's walls seemed to pulse as if alive, as if aware of his presence. A distant hum reverberated through the floor, almost like a heartbeat. They reached a vast observation deck overlooking a chamber filled with complex machinery. Massive tubes ran across the floor, walls and ceiling, glowing with energy that seemed alive. Elias felt a mixture of awe and fear. The technology was beyond anything he had studied. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. This is what humans face, Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. Not just weapons, not just armies, but systems that think faster than you do, react faster than you can, and adapt to any threat. Elias studied the machinery. He felt a strange excitement rise in him, the same feeling he had when he repaired a malfunctioning system at work, only amplified 1,000 times. He realized that understanding patterns, anticipating reactions, predicting outcomes, it was all something he could do even here. Lyra watched him. You are noticing details most would overlook. That is why they chose you. Not for strength, not for leadership, but for observation. You are human, and humans see differently than we do. Elias nodded, though he did not know what to say. He felt small, insignificant, and yet a part of him began to awaken. The fear was still there, but now it was mingled with determination. Hours passed. Lyra guided him through the observation deck, pointing out systems, explaining patterns, occasionally asking questions he could not answer. Each moment built on the last, each revelation increasing his understanding, and with it, his sense of responsibility. When they finally stopped, Elias realized that night had fallen, though the citadel's lights made it impossible to know for sure. Lyra turned to him. Tonight, she said, you will understand the real test. It is not about obedience. It is not about fear. It is about what you can see that others cannot, and what you can do when no one expects you to act. Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. He did not know what awaited him, but he knew one thing. This was only the beginning, and nothing would ever be the same again. Elias's mind raced as Lyra led him down another corridor. The walls here were darker, smoother, with a faint vibration that he could feel under his feet. Each step echoed unnaturally, though no one else was visible. He began to understand that the citadel itself was designed to make a person aware of their own thoughts, magnify fear, and test patience. They entered a chamber that felt smaller than the observation deck, yet somehow more imposing. The floor was a glass-like material, glowing faintly from below, and the walls had panels filled with symbols that shifted in ways he could not comprehend. There were no chairs, no furniture, just space and silence. Lyra turned to him, Her expression remained calm, but her eyes glimmered with something unreadable. "This is the chamber where the test begins." Elias felt a tightening in his chest. "Test? I thought the observation was the test." She shook her head slowly. "Observation is preparation. Now comes the trial." Before he could ask what trial, a section of the floor slid open. From beneath, a platform rose slowly, carrying a device that looked part console, part cage. It pulsed with energy, wires and tubes connecting it to the walls. Elias instinctively stepped back. "This device records human response," Lyra said. "It monitors your heart, your stress, your decision-making under pressure. It is designed to push you to your limits. Tonight, it is not enough to survive. You must understand." Elias swallowed hard. He was used to machinery he could fix, circuits he could control, but this machine was alien, alive, in ways he could not predict, and Lyra had not warned him what would happen once he interacted with it. "Step forward," she commanded. Her tone left no room for refusal. Elias hesitated, then obeyed. The floor beneath the platform had changed, now glowing a soft red. The machine hummed as he approached, wires stretching slightly as if reaching for him. A panel slid out, revealing a small cushioned seat. He sat, feeling the weight of invisible attention pressing down on him. The machine attached small devices to his wrists and temples. They were cold, but not painful. He felt a wave of anxiety rise within him. He had no idea what this device would do. He could not predict it. He was in a controlled environment where nothing followed human rules. Lyra stepped closer, her hand hovering near a panel. "It is time. Remember what you observed. Use what you have learned. Humans are clever. You are clever. Show them why." The machine activated. Lights flickered across the panels, symbols shifting rapidly. Elias's vision blurred as streams of data poured into his mind. He could feel patterns, connections, and sequences forming, though his brain struggled to keep up. It was like looking at a storm and trying to follow every gust of wind. "You are thinking too linearly," Lyra said. "Observe beyond the obvious." He blinked, trying to calm himself. The symbols on the wall rearranged themselves. The energy beneath him pulsed. He realized the machine was not just observing. It was interacting. It was testing not only his reactions, but also his thought process. Minutes passed like hours. Elias's mind burned, but slowly he began to see patterns. Small ones at first, then larger. He started to predict the flow of energy, the sequence of lights, the way the machine tried to push him into panic. Each correct observation brought a faint sense of control, a tiny victory in an overwhelming environment. "You are improving," Lyra said quietly. "Do not let fear dictate you. Let it guide you." Then the chamber shifted. Walls glowed brighter. Sounds he had not noticed before reached his ears. Soft clicks, hums, mechanical breathing. He realized the entire room was connected to the machine. It was not just a test. It was a network, a living system reacting to his every move. A sudden alarm-like tone sounded. The machine's pulsing accelerated. Wires stretched further, connecting more panels around the room. Elias felt a surge of panic, but he remembered Lyra's words. Fear was a tool. It was not the enemy. He focused. He tracked the lights, followed the shifting symbols, and noticed an anomaly, a section that repeated in a cycle slightly out of sync with the rest. That was the flaw. That was the key. He moved his hands, touching panels, making decisions almost instinctively. The machine reacted. The pulsing slowed. The lights synchronized. The alarm ceased. Elias sat back, breathing heavily. Sweat ran down his face, his muscles tense. The chamber seemed quieter, almost approving. Lyra studied him silently. Then for the first time, a small smile appeared on her face. "You see, you are more than they expected." "What do you mean?" Elias asked, still catching his breath. "The Alliance fears humans not for strength, not for weapons," she said. "They fear your ability to think beyond immediate limits to find paths others cannot imagine. You have proven that tonight." He had survived a test, yes, but he felt far from victory. The fear had not disappeared. It had only shifted, becoming sharper, more focused. "You are ready for the next phase," Lyra said. "But it is not over. Nothing is ever over. Observation ends, but action begins now." Elias looked at her, uncertainty in his eyes. "Action? What kind of action?" "You will see soon enough," she replied, stepping back. "For now, rest. You will need your mind clear. Tomorrow, you will face challenges that do not have instructions, that do not wait for you to prepare. Only those who adapt survive." He nodded, though he felt no rest coming. His mind was still racing, images of shifting lights and pulsing energy replaying over and over. He realized that the Citadel itself was a test, and Lyra was not just a participant. She was a guide, a strategist, someone who understood the stakes far better than he did. That night, as he lay on a cot in a room simple by alien standards, Elias stared at the ceiling. He thought of Earth, of the quiet streets and familiar routines, of a life that now felt impossibly distant. He thought of the Council, who had sent him here as a pawn, and of Lyra, whose presence was both terrifying and oddly reassuring. He understood that survival alone would not be enough. He would need to see patterns others missed, anticipate moves before they happened, and trust instincts he had never relied on before. The fear was still there, but now it had a purpose. Somewhere in the distance the Citadel hummed. It was alive, aware, and watching, and Elias knew, deep in his bones, that tonight was only the beginning. The night had taught him more than any council briefing could. The trial had begun, and he was a participant, a student, and perhaps, in ways he did not yet understand, a player in something far larger than himself. Elias woke to a quiet hum. The room was dim but not dark, the walls glowing faintly like they had been alive all night. He had slept, or maybe rested, though his mind still raced with patterns, images, and the lessons from the chamber. He remembered the pulsing lights, the data, and the feeling of control he had briefly grasped, but rest had not removed the tension. It had only sharpened it. Lyra was waiting outside his room. She had not slept, or if she had, it had been lightly. Her silver-toned skin reflected the pale lights of the corridor, and her expression was calm but precise, almost unreadable. Elias felt the weight of her observation immediately. "Ready?" she asked. Elias nodded, though his stomach twisted. "I think so." She led him through the corridors again, this time deeper into sections of the Citadel he had not seen. The air grew colder, the shadows longer. Machinery hummed faintly behind walls, and the floor seemed to pulse with energy. Elias realized that each step they took was under watch, that every movement, every decision was being monitored. But unlike the chamber, this was not a direct test. This was observation on a scale he had not yet understood. They reached a vast room filled with machinery that stretched in all directions, towers of metal and light intertwined like roots of a tree, wires and conduits moving in ways that suggested both structure and life. Screens floated in the air, projecting data, schematics, and sequences he had never learned to read. It was overwhelming. "Look closely," Lyra said. "Understand what you see. Humans are clever, but this will challenge even you. Observe patterns, anticipate changes, and do not trust instinct alone. Think further than you have before." Elias studied the machinery. At first it made no sense. Patterns shifted too fast, systems intertwined in ways that seemed chaotic, but slowly, pieces began to stand out. Certain conduits moved in cycles, certain lights blinked in sequences that repeated. A series of anomalies appeared, subtle but consistent. "You notice it?" Lyra asked, her voice calm but edged with anticipation. Elias nodded. "Something is off. A few sections are repeating differently than the rest." She smiled faintly. "Good. Focus there. The rest is noise." For hours, Elias observed, tracing connections with his eyes and fingers in the air, following sequences as if he could touch them. Lyra pointed out nuances he might have missed. Micro fluctuations in energy, subtle shifts in light speed, faint vibrations that indicated stress points. She did not explain why these mattered, only that he must see them. Eventually, a section of the machinery shifted abruptly. Panels descended, creating a barrier that blocked part of the room. Lights blinked erratically, alarms sounded faintly. Elias realized the machinery had noticed him noticing it. It reacted. "Now," Lyra said. "Decide, act." Elias took a deep breath. He remembered the chamber, the trial, the way the machine had pushed him to fear and then forced him to think beyond it. He understood instinct alone would not save him. He had to predict, to anticipate, to act without full information. He reached toward the panels, pressing sequences that matched the anomalies he had observed. The lights pulsed. The machinery hesitated, as if weighing his choices. Then, slowly, it shifted back into harmony. The alarm stopped. The erratic motions steadied. Elias sat back, heart pounding. "You did well," Lyra said. Her smile was slightly wider now. "You see more than most. You act where others hesitate. This is why humans are dangerous. You adapt, and you think beyond limits." Elias shook his head in disbelief. "I don't feel clever. I feel lucky." "Luck is part of life," she said. "But understanding patterns, noticing subtleties, acting under pressure, Those are skills. You have them. They are why you survived the chamber. They are why you are here. He realized that survival had not been random. Every fear, every decision, every step had been preparation. He had learned to trust his mind, to trust his observation, even when the environment was alien and threatening. Lyra guided him to a smaller room filled with transparent tubes, each containing glowing liquid that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Energy flowed through them, and inside, small devices or life forms moved in patterns that were mesmerizing. Elias watched, captivated, though uncertain what to make of it. These are adaptive cores, Lyra explained. They respond to stimuli, learn, and change. The Citadel uses them to maintain balance, monitor threats, and adapt defenses. They are alive in ways your species will not fully understand for decades. Observe, learn, and respect them. One mistake and you could be trapped or worse. Elias studied them carefully, noting how each core reacted to light, sound, and pressure. He began to see patterns again, subtle responses that indicated intelligence and awareness. He realized the Citadel itself was not just a building, it was an entity, and he was now part of its environment. Hours passed. Lyra remained beside him, guiding, observing, and occasionally pointing out small details. She asked questions that forced him to think beyond instinct, to analyze, to consider outcomes. Each moment tested him mentally and emotionally, but he grew more confident. Finally, she stepped back. You are ready for what comes next. But understand this, nothing is predictable. Observation will only take you so far, adaptation will take you further. Fear is a tool. Use it. Elias nodded. He felt exhaustion, but also a strange exhilaration. He understood that he had passed another test, but he also knew this was not the end. The Citadel, Lyra, and the machinery were all part of a larger plan. The real challenges had yet to come. As they walked back through the corridors, Elias felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had learned more in these hours than in a lifetime on Earth, and yet the unknown still loomed, vast and threatening. He realized that fear, observation, and adaptation were not just tools for survival. They were keys to understanding a world far beyond his own. And as he followed Lyra through the silent, pulsing halls, he understood that the night had already changed him. He was no longer just a systems engineer from Earth. He was part of a larger game, one where intelligence, courage, and insight would determine the difference between survival and failure. Elias awoke to a sudden vibration beneath the Citadel. The air felt charged, heavier than before, as if the building itself had sensed a change. He rose from the cot, muscles stiff, heart racing. Hilaro was already waiting in the corridor, her silver-toned skin catching the pale lights, eyes sharp and focused. We move quickly, she said, her voice calm but urgent. Tonight, you will face choices that cannot be predicted. Observation is no longer enough. You must act. Elias followed her through the winding corridors. The hum of the Citadel was louder, filled with energy that felt alive. Panels along the walls glowed intermittently, showing information he could barely comprehend. The environment was no longer just a test. It was a battlefield of thought and strategy. They reached a large room filled with multiple tiers of machinery, each pulsing and moving in response to some unseen logic. Elias's mind raced, recalling patterns he had noticed earlier, but now the machinery was more aggressive, more responsive. Alarms rang faintly and lights flashed erratically. What is happening? He asked. They believe an error has occurred, Lyra explained. They will try to suppress you. They do not understand humans fully. That is why you are here. Elias felt a surge of anxiety. The machinery, the Citadel, even Lyra herself were all part of a complex system. He realized that one wrong step could trap him, or worse, trigger consequences he could not predict. But he also knew he had learned to observe, to anticipate, to act beyond instinct. The machinery shifted suddenly. Wires extended, connecting panels across the room. Lights pulsed rapidly. The Citadel's automated defense systems activated. A low hum turned into a high-pitched resonance that made Elias's teeth ache. Lyra stepped back slightly, observing but not intervening. Now, she said. Act. Elias took a deep breath. He focused on the patterns he had memorized, tracing energy flows with his eyes, predicting sequences and making decisions almost instinctively. He moved between consoles, pressing buttons, rerouting energy and stabilizing panels that threatened to overload. The Citadel seemed to react to him, testing, probing, adjusting. Minutes passed in intense focus. Sweat ran down his face. His hands shook, but he maintained control. He noticed a section of the machinery that repeated cycles incorrectly, just as he had seen in previous tests. He intervened, rerouting energy and synchronizing the flow. Machines stilled, lights steadied, alarms ceased. "You are doing more than survive," Lyra said quietly. "You are shaping the environment. That is why humans are feared. You do not just react. You create paths others cannot foresee." Elias paused, realizing she was right. His actions were not merely following instructions. He was adapting, creating solutions, and anticipating responses. Fear was still present, but now it was focused, purposeful, a tool to guide him rather than paralyze. Suddenly, a new alert sounded. Panels shifted, and a section of the floor descended into darkness. Alarms blared. The Citadel's internal security units began moving through the halls. Lyra's expression tightened. "This is unexpected," she said. "You must choose. Move with me, stay in control, or use the environment to your advantage." Elias's mind raced. He could feel the Citadel's intelligence observing, calculating, responding to each choice. He remembered the lessons from the chambers, the observation decks, and the adaptive cores. Instinct was not enough. He needed strategy, foresight, and courage, he decided. Moving quickly, he activated panels to reroute energy through secondary conduits, creating a barrier between the security units and their intended path. He used the Citadel's own systems against them, predicting their response and forcing them into a controlled route. Lyra followed his movements, impressed, silent, her eyes keenly observing each choice. The alarms gradually diminished, lights steadied. The machinery pulsed in rhythm, acknowledging his adaptation. Elias felt a rush of triumph, but it was tempered by the understanding that this was only part of a larger test. The Citadel was alive, and he had only glimpsed its complexity. Lyra approached him. "You are beginning to understand. The Alliance believes control is absolute, but humans create variables they cannot calculate. Tonight proves it." Elias nodded, still catching his breath. "I feel like I am part of it, yet also being watched. It is exhausting and terrifying." "That is the point," she replied. "Fear, exhaustion, uncertainty, these reveal the core of your species. You adapt, survive, and learn. That is why you are dangerous." They moved through the corridors again, the Citadel quieting as if satisfied for the moment. Elias realized that the trials were not just about survival or skill, they were about understanding. Lyra had guided him to see patterns, to act decisively, and to create paths where none seemed possible. He thought of Earth, of the quiet streets and familiar routines, of the council that had sent him here as a pawn, and he realized that the fear of humans, as Lyra said, was real, not because of strength, but because of their ability to think, adapt, and act unpredictably. The night stretched on. Elias and Lyra continued through sections of the Citadel that revealed more adaptive systems, energy flows, and security measures. Each encounter tested his observation, his decision-making, and his courage. He began to see the Citadel not as a threat, but as a puzzle to understand and influence. Hours passed, and the first pale light of alien dawn began to filter through the outer layers of the Citadel. Elias felt exhaustion, but also a sense of clarity. He had survived the night, acted decisively, and understood the depth of the challenges he faced. Lyra paused at a viewing platform overlooking a chamber filled with active energy conduits. "Tomorrow will be different," she said. "You will face choices with consequences far beyond what you imagine. But tonight proves one thing. Humans are not to be underestimated. Observation alone does not define you. Action, adaptation, and insight do." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He understood now that the marriage, the trials, and the Citadel itself were all part of a larger plan, one that would challenge humans and aliens alike. As he prepared to rest, Elias realized that fear had not disappeared. It had transformed. It was no longer a chain but a guide, sharpening his senses, forcing him to think beyond instinct. He was no longer just a systems engineer from Earth. He was a participant in a complex environment, capable of influencing outcomes in ways he had never imagined. The Citadel hummed around him, alive and aware. Lyra's presence remained close, a calm, guiding force, and Elias knew that the night's trials were only the beginning. Tomorrow the real challenges would come, and he would be ready, not just to survive, but to act in ways that could change everything. Elias walked alongside Lyra through the final corridors of the Citadel, the morning light from distant energy sources illuminating the metallic walls. The Citadel was quiet now, almost as if it were holding its breath after the previous night's events. Elias felt a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. He had survived the trials, acted decisively, and learned more about the Citadel than he ever imagined possible. Lyra's gaze was steady. You have proven more than I expected," she said. You understand systems, patterns, and risks, but the Alliance will not ignore what happened. Your actions tonight will be known, and they will change how humans are seen." Elias tried to absorb her words. "You mean they will treat us differently now?" "Yes," she said. "Fear and respect are two sides of the same coin. They underestimated your species. They will not again." As they approached the observation deck, Elias noticed subtle changes. Panels displayed information about the Citadel, showing recalibrated energy flows, security adjustments, and system logs. It was clear that the Citadel itself had responded to his actions, recognizing his intelligence, adaptability, and ability to act under pressure. He realized the machines were not just tools. They were participants, aware and reactive. Lyra pointed toward a viewing screen showing multiple alien council members. Their expressions were tense, concerned, and in some cases bewildered. Elias felt a surge of pride mixed with unease. The council had sent him here expecting a pawn. Instead, he had become a factor they could not control. "They will meet soon," Lyra said. "They will attempt to restore control. Your challenge is not over, but the balance has shifted. You are no longer just a participant. You are an unexpected variable." Elias felt the weight of that statement. He had always thought of himself as insignificant, a systems engineer with no influence. But now, he understood the power of insight, adaptability, and decisive action. He was a symbol, whether he wanted to be or not. Suddenly, the Citadel's systems alerted them to a new disturbance. Automated patrol units moved in corridors beyond their observation. Panels blinked rapidly. Elias realized this was a test he had not anticipated. Action with real consequences, not simulated or controlled trials. He turned to Lyra. "What do we do?" "We act," she replied. "You guide. I support. Use what you have learned. Create the path no one expects." Elias studied the panels, tracing patterns, energy flows, and unit movements. He predicted their responses, rerouted circuits, and adjusted security mechanisms. Each action influenced the Citadel's systems, forcing the automated units into predictable patterns. He felt the same exhilaration and focus he had experienced the night before, but now the stakes were higher. Lives and authority were involved, and failure was not an option. As they worked, Lyra observed silently, only pointing out critical details when necessary. Her confidence in him strengthened his own. He realized that trust and cooperation were just as important as observation and action. Together, they became a team, navigating the Citadel's complex systems and shifting environment. Hours passed. The disturbances subsided, the units were contained, and the Citadel stabilized. Elias felt relief, but he knew this was more than a temporary victory. The night's actions had consequences beyond the walls of the Citadel. The Alliance would be forced to acknowledge the human capacity for ingenuity and unpredictability. Lyra finally spoke, her tone calm but carrying weight. "You have changed perception tonight. Humans are no longer a defeated species. You have shown them that intelligence, courage, and adaptability cannot be calculated or suppressed." Elias took a deep breath, trying to absorb the enormity of her words. He had always thought of humans as ordinary, fragile, and limited. Now he understood that the very qualities the Alliance feared, creativity, adaptation, unpredictability, were the greatest strengths of his species. He looked out from the observation deck at the vast Citadel, its systems still pulsing with energy. He realized that this structure, these machines, and Lyra's guidance had all been a crucible. The trials were not punishment, nor were they merely tests. They were preparation for a galaxy that underestimated humanity. The Alien Council began to send communications. Their voices were tense, cautious, and, for the first time, respectful. Elias felt the shift. Earth would no longer be seen as weak. Humanity had earned recognition through intellect and courage, not warships or weaponry. Lyra stood beside him, her presence calm and steady. "The Alliance will fear, but also watch carefully," she said. "They will attempt to predict your next moves. Do not let them. Continue to observe, continue to act, and continue to adapt." Elias nodded. He understood that his role had changed. He was no longer just a representative of Earth. He was a symbol of what humans could achieve, a living proof of adaptability and insight. Fear had not been removed. It had been transformed into awareness and focus, guiding him rather than paralyzing. The Citadel hummed around them, alive and responsive. Machines and energy flowed in harmony, acknowledging his understanding and action. Lyra's presence reinforced his confidence, but he knew the true test would always be ahead. The galaxy would not accept predictability. Humanity had proven its value, but that value came with responsibility. As Elias prepared to leave the observation deck, he looked back at the corridors they had traversed. Each trial, each challenge had taught him something vital. Fear, observation, adaptation, action, trust. These were not just lessons. They were keys to survival and influence in a universe that valued calculation, precision, and control. He turned to Lyra. We have done what we could. The rest is out of our hands. She smiled faintly. Perhaps. But you have proven more than you know. The galaxy will wake to a new understanding of your species. That is a change that cannot be undone. He had been chosen to represent humanity in a union he never wanted. He had faced trials that seemed impossible, and yet, through observation, adaptation, and decisive action, he had altered perceptions, challenged expectations, and emerged stronger. He realized that marriage, trials, and fear had not been obstacles. They had been catalysts. They had revealed what humans could accomplish when pushed beyond limits, when required to think, adapt, and act in unpredictable ways. The Citadel continued to hum, alive and aware, a silent witness to the transformation. Lyra's calm presence reinforced his confidence, and Elias understood, finally, that this was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of humanity's rise, a dawn that would be watched and feared across the galaxy.